Welcome to Sagenheim. In the previous part of the Thidrekssaga, we heard about the sons of Samson, Erminrek and Thetmar, Samson's last will for glory, and Erminrek becoming king after Samson's death. Here now, as we continue from the olden days. King Thetmar now ruled over Bern. He was a great and strong man, noble, wise, ambitious, a great one for battles, happy and modest, generous and munificent, and popular with his men. His wife Attila was wise and popular, and she was more accomplished than other women in all respects. They had a son, who was called Thidrek. When he had grown up, he was so large that he scarcely had his match, unless it was a giant. He was long-faced and regular of features, light in color, had the best eyes of all men, dark brown in color. His hair was light and fair and fell in curls. He had no beard, no matter how old he got. His shoulders were so broad that they measured 2 ells across. His arms were stout, like a great trunk, and hard as stone. He had fair hands. In the waist he was slender and well formed, and his hips and his thighs were so stout that everyone thought it was strange how the man had been shaped. His legs were fair and well shaped, and his calves and ankles were so stout that they could have belonged to a giant. His strength was greater than any man knew, and he himself scarcely tested it. He was cheerful and modest, generous and a giver of great gifts, so that he did not hold back from his friends, with gold or silver, or treasure, or with almost anything they would accept. Anyone who had seen Samson said that, in form and disposition, he might be his equal. And those who had not seen King Samson thought that there had never been such a man as Didrik in all respects. King Thetmar dubbed Thidrek a knight when he was 12 years old. He made him chief of his retainers over all of his men and his knights, and the more powerful he became, the more he valued him. A duke ruled over the city that is called Venidi. He was a great chieftain and a man of great accomplishments. His sons were Boltram and Reginbald, who were later dukes of Venidi and Svava. Reginbald had a son named Hildibrand. When he was 12 years old, he took his weapons and went before his father's high seat, and the duke dubbed him a knight and made him chief over many knights. Duke Boltram had a son named Reginbald. Reginbald's son was Sintram, and he will be mentioned later. Hildibrand was a handsome man, and bright of countenance, broad-faced, very keen of sight, and straight-nosed. His hair and beard were as golden as silk, and as curly as plain shavings. He was the most lordly of men. He was tall, wise, and a most influential man, and in courage he was a leader of many, and he was so steadfast as a friend that he would never abandon a friend in need. He was generous with money and modest. In all the land he had no equal in mind, in valor, and in all accomplishments that were needed for knighthood. When Hildibrand was 30, he told his father that he wanted to explore the customs of other noblemen. "I shall never become famous if I never do anything but stay at home in Venidi or ride to Svava." The duke asked where he intended to travel, and Hildibrand answered that he had heard of a powerful king. "And it is a long way to go there. It is Thetmar, king of Bern. I want to travel there." And now he made preparations and took with him 15 knights, who were all valiant and well equipped. He rode away on his journey until he arrived at Bern to meet King Thetmar. The king welcomed him warmly and asked him to stay with him and to prosper, and Hildibrand accepted gladly. The king seated him nearest himself, and he later remained with King Thidrek for a long time, as will be told later in the saga. Thidrek, the son of King Thetmar, was at that time 5 years old. Hildibrand set Didrik down next to him and fostered him until he was 12 years old, and was made chief of the retainers. They loved each other more than any valiant men have since King David and Jonathan. Now it must be told that Thidrek and Hildibrand rode out of Bern together with their hawks and their dogs into a forest to amuse themselves with their weapons. They let the hawks fly and loosed their dogs. As Thidrek was pursuing a hart, he saw a dwarf running along. He chased the dwarf, and before he could reach his hut, Thidrek put his hands around his neck and pulled him up onto his saddle. It was Alfrek, the great thief, who was the most skillful of all the dwarves. The dwarf spoke. "Sir, if I free myself from you and save my life, I will show you where there is much gold and silver and all kinds of treasure. So much that your father couldn't have half as much as his wealth. 2 people own this treasure. One of them is a woman named Hild, and the other is her husband Grim. He is exceedingly bold and is comparable to 12 men in strength. His wife is even stronger. They are both grim and evil, and he has a sword called Nagelring, which is the best of all swords, and which I made with my own hands. You will not be able to win the victory unless you take the sword. It is a greater feat for you and your companion to seek so much money through bravery than to take my short body and short legs." Thidrek answered, "You will never escape from my hands alive before you swear to me that you will bring me Nagelring today, and that you will then show me the way to the lodging you were talking about." The dwarf did so, and Thidrek set him free and hunted birds and animals until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. After 3 o'clock, Thidrek and Hildibrand were standing by a mountainside when Alfrek came up with Nagelring, gave it to Thidrek, and spoke. "See, here in this mountainside, toward that crack there, is the earth house I told you about. Take now the treasures, because there's enough there, but it will be a deed of valor if the 2 of you take it. And never shall you again get me in your power as long as I live, even if you live 2 men's lifetimes." The next moment, the dwarf had vanished. Then Thidrek and Hildibrand got off their horses and tied them up. Thidrek drew the sword the dwarf had brought him, and they both said that they had never seen a finer or sharper sword. It is now to be told that they went to the mountainside and searched there until they found an earth house. They bound their horses fast and put on their helmets, put on their byrnies and mailhose, and placed their shields before them. And now Thidrek went bravely into the earth house, and Hildibrand followed him immediately. When the strong berserk Grim saw that warriors had come into his house, he went to his weapon chest and saw that his sword was gone. He realized that it must have been stolen by the dwarf Alfrek, the great thief. He took a glowing log from the fire and turned to meet them, and they fought valiantly. Hildibrand could not move forward because Hild had him around the neck so tightly that he could not resist. And now they wrestled such a terribly long time that Hildibrand fell, and Hild came down on top of him and wanted to tie him up. She gripped his arms so tightly that blood spurted out from each of his fingernails, and she pressed both her fists so hard against his chest that he fell unconscious for a moment. Then Hildibrand spoke to his foster son. "Sir Thidrek," he said, "help me now, for I have never been tested so." Thidrek answered, "I shall certainly help you if I can, and shall not endure that a woman should bring my foster father and my best friend into such need or near death?" And with one stroke, Thidrek cut off Grim's head and leapt to the place where his foster father was. He struck Hild in 2 pieces, but because she was skilled at magic and had much troll in her nature, the 2 parts jumped together as if they were whole. This seemed a great wonder to Thidrek, and he struck a 2nd time at her torso. Everything happened as before. And then Hildibrand spoke. "Put your feet between the head part and the foot part, and you will be able to destroy this troll." And then Thidrek struck her a 3rd time into 2 pieces, and placed his feet between the 2 parts. The lower part was dead, but the head part spoke. If Grim had been able to defeat Thidrek, as I was able to deal with Hildibrand, then we would have won. Now each part fell its way, and Hildibrand sprang up and spoke. "Certainly, you have often given me such great help. May God reward you." They now took gold and silver and all kinds of treasure, so that it did not seem to them that the dwarf had been lying. Then they found a helmet, the like of which they had never seen. And Alfrek the dwarf had also told them about it. Both Hild and Grim had considered it such a great treasure that each of them wanted to give the helmet their own name. Because of this, he called it Hildigrim. Thidrek wore the same helmet for a long time in great battles. Thidrek and Hildibrand took as much of the treasure as their horses could carry, and hid the rest carefully. After that, they traveled home. Because of these great deeds, and many others like them, Thidrek became famous in every land. And thus, the 5th part of the Thidrekssaga is coming to an end. In the next part, we will hear about Brynhild, Studda, and Heimir, and the fortress Zegard at the Harz Mountains, as well as Heimir's duel with Thidrek in Bern. So thanks for tuning in, and see you again next time, back here at Sagenheim.